Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, John Evans on the show. It's a Friday. We're a day late, but that's all right. Scheduling issues from football and whatnot. But here we are. Game preview, Oregon, USC. It's a big one. It's one of the biggest games in probably the Lanning era, I would say, especially at home at least. Ducks 9-1. They're ranked inside the top 7 for the college football playoff. They're ranked 7th in the country. USC 15th. This is probably Oregon's one and only chance remaining on the schedule to claim a top 25 win. Maybe Washington sneaks in there late next week for that game, but if they lose, do they stay in the rankings? This is a resume building win potentially for Oregon. This is a win that gives them a little bit of breathing room next week on the road at Washington if they win this game. If they lose this game at 10-2, it becomes really tricky to find their way into the college football playoffs, even with a win at Washington the following week.
Agreed.
So you could argue like this feels kind of like a playoff game. Play your way into the game or keep your name in the playoff field if you're Oregon's sake. USC, on the other hand, coming in, and everything is still on the table for them. They win this game on the road. They go down to UCLA and win that one next week. They're in the playoffs. They are squarely in the mix, and they actually have a chance at the Big Ten title game possibility as well if Michigan could beat Ohio State. And we should note, same as Oregon. Oregon still has a chance to get into that game. So this is a massive game here at Autzen Stadium, 12:30 kick. Two West Coast perennial powers going at it, and it's like the sixth time in like the last 15-ish, 18-ish years that these two teams have played, and they're both ranked.
It's kind of perfect how this is set up, I think, for West Coast football fans. If you're Oregon, just because it's USC and Washington to close, and if you beat both your rivals now on the West in the Big Ten, you're in the playoffs. As Matt said, there's a slim chance Michigan beats Ohio State. I'm not confident in that happens. I'd be shocked, frankly, if that happened again. But if it does, Oregon goes to Indianapolis, has a chance to repeat as Big Ten champions, which would be an incredible feat joining this conference. I'm actually curious. Fans can let us know in the comments. Like, would you prefer not to go to that game based upon what happened last year and how that maybe threw things off going into postseason play? It seems like that there's some kind of leanings that way, but regardless, yeah, this is a huge game. And in terms of Oregon's college football playoff resume, it's lacking a signature win. USC would be that with the victory. It's obviously not like Alabama beating Georgia or any of those kind of wins, but it would be a very impressive victory to kind of have in your back pocket when they're discussing seeding in postseason play. And frankly, if you were to lose one of these last two games, you'd probably rather have it be Washington in a weird way, because that means you'd have that USC win to solidify a spot or to at least differentiate when you're looking at two lost teams. So a ton on the line. It's super fun. And I'm frankly just fired up that Oregon USC kind of means something this late in the season. We haven't really had a game like this in a minute where these two teams met and there was this kind of implications.
Yeah, there are tons of ways that things can play out. I was reading an article on The Athletic the other day and just saying, like, with this 12-team playoff, at this point, there's like 30 teams that are still alive just across the different conferences. But the only way to control your destiny and control what you're doing in so much as you can, if Ohio State and Indiana keep winning, they're going to play each other in the Big Ten championship. But the only way to make sure you're in the playoff for Oregon is to keep winning these games. So as good as USC is, and this could be, people talk about this as an eliminator game for the playoff potentially. Like it really could be. So Oregon has to, can't take this game lightly. USC they're going to be, Oregon's favored in this game pretty substantially, but USC is, has been hot for the last month or so, has been taking out teams and, is in a position that they could elevate themselves. And if a win for USC, like you were saying, with that win at UCLA next weekend, they would be sitting very comfortably in that, kind of bottom half, but definitely in the playoff for sure.
This is a matchup of, John mentioned big USC Big Ten run. They've won 4 straight Big Ten games. They have a loss to Notre Dame, sandwiched in there in a non-conference game. Oregon has also won 4 straight Big Ten games. And this is going to be 2 of the 3 best offenses in the country duking it out from a yards per play perspective. 2 explosive offenses playing on the field on Saturday. Now, the caveat here, I think, goes to what does USC's defense, what level can they play at? Because there's a substantial difference, statistically at least, on paper. You look at the teams and how they've stacked up. Oregon's defense, they are one of the top 5 defenses in the country. They have the number 1 pass defense in the country. USC's defense is nowhere close to that. They are kind of in that 30 to the 45, 50 range for a lot of their statistics. They are elite and good in a couple areas, but from an overall standpoint, they aren't the, I guess, juggernaut that an Oregon defense is kind of considered. So, how does that, from an Oregon perspective, match up with USC's offense? And B, how high of a level will USC's defense play up against Oregon's? And keep in mind, Oregon's offense still, we don't know yet DeCorian Moore. We don't know yet Gary Bryant Jr. We don't know yet possible return of an Evan Stewart. Certainly, if you follow social media and the Oregon accounts, you've seen maybe some gamemanship here of the school sharing some photos of DeCorian Moore in practice. Is that practice this week, or is that practice from a month ago? We don't really know that. They've really cropped it in really tight, but we've seen DeCorian Moore practice photos. Evan Stewart certainly is sharing stuff on social media as well. That is uncertainty also should be factored into play for the Oregon's matchup against USC's defense. Maybe let's start here of just kind of previewing the Oregon offense.
I'm there's a lot here that's interesting. I think the most important thing for me is just this Oregon rush offense. I have a lot of confidence that they are going to be successful regardless of opponent. USC's defense has had a hard time with good rush offenses. I mean, you look at this, Notre Dame had over 300 yards rushing in that win. Even recently against Nebraska and Iowa, over 180 yards in both of those games, giving up a little bit over 5 yards per carry there. So this is not an elite rush defense by any means. They're 10th in the Big Ten in yards per game, and they're 13th in yards per carry allowed. So this is a potential Oregon can win this game primarily on the ground type of a game here. I will also say you look at what USC has done this year, and I go back to a game with Michigan where they won 31-13, and it was their best rush defensive performance of the season, I think. 31 carries, 109 yards, no touchdowns on the ground for the Wolverines. Like, to me, that's the playbook that's the game plan for Michigan, or sorry, for USC. Can they do what they did against Michigan, against this Oregon rush offense? Can they get everything stacked up and win on third down? And I think, the other part that we have to talk about, Matt mentioned the question marks injury related for Oregon. USC's dealing with some questions with both of their starting safeties, who are 2 of their better defensive players, Kamari Ramsey, Bishop Fitzgerald, and then their left tackles out. We can talk about that on that side of the ball. But, if both those safeties don't play, and let's say Oregon is down the receivers, kind of seems like that might be the case. So there's maybe more rumblings that Gary Bryant might play from kind of some things I've heard than the other outside receivers. That could kind of mitigate some of those Oregon issues a little bit if USC is also down its 2 top safeties. But to me, it's run game. If Oregon is able to go out here, they're on a streak here where they're averaging over 250 yards per game over the last 4. They've hit 200 in 3 of the last 4. If they're able to do that again, if they get to 200-yard rushing, I would be really surprised if it's not in a winning effort. That would suggest that they're winning at the line of scrimmage. And with the weather looking the way it's supposed to, and Dante having played the way he's looked in good weather games, there's a lot to like in this matchup for Oregon offensively, I think.
Yeah, I think it starts with the run game for sure. I was just going to mention that Notre Dame game as well. Obviously, Jeremiah Love, they have dynamic running backs there, but I think Oregon has some guys that can do things, not to the level of Jeremiah Love, but De'Aaron Hill can break off some big runs. Noah Whittington, we've seen break off some big runs. And even that Iowa game last week, like early in that one, Iowa ran it right down on them, scored early touchdowns, and USA was able to work their way back into that game. But Iowa got up on them early, and I was thinking, wow, Oregon could really do some things to this team, because I was looking at like you were saying, the yards per carry, or the yards per game ends up being like a middle of the pack in terms of the country. But it's because teams are behind them a lot and have to throw. So their yards per carry is down at like 90th.
Right.
In terms of what they're allowing to these other teams, they just don't have the bodies in the middle. So I think they're, Emmanuel Pregnant was talking about how he felt even more powerful switching to the right side because he's punching with his right hand. I think Oregon has dudes up the middle, and that this game starts. USC fans are not going to be happy with it because of Jordan Davison is a guy coming out of Mater Dei in Southern California, but I think there's going to be a lot of Jordan Davison up the middle and a lot of run for Oregon. I think, getting to that 200-yard mark is going to be what Oregon is at least looking for in this game at the minimum.
Yeah, you look at the games in which USC this season has lost, and it's only 2, but they are substantially higher in the yards per carry than average allowed than all of their wins. When they went and they lost to Illinois, they gave up 4.89 yards per carry. That's not a terrible number. It's certainly not the highest number they've allowed. But that Notre Dame game, 44 rushes, which is a season high allowed for the USC defense, 306 yards, which is a season high allowed, 6.95 yards per carry allowed, which is a season high for the defense, and 3 rushing touchdowns allowed, which is a season high. That's the recipe for Oregon. Like, as much as I think last week we were all on here saying against Minnesota, like, hey, we want to see the ball aired out. We want to see this offense really open up and become explosive and take deep shots and be super aggressive through the air. That's still kind of, at least in my eyes, it's still in play. It still has to be shown. But the bread and butter of this game is going to be wear down the USC defense, especially if they've got guys out with injury, and lean into your offensive line and run the football 35, 45 times in this football game and just almost kind of put them into submission of running the football and being aggressive and getting your chunk plays there, because nothing is more demoralizing playing in the cold, even if it's going to be a day game, playing late in the year. Everyone's bodies are banged up a little bit, and the team you're playing is just going downhill every play and getting 6, 7, 8 yards, and there's nothing you can really do to stop it. That's demoralizing. And then it opens up everything else over the top because everyone starts kind of gradually sucking in. So I'm with you guys. Like, Oregon's run game here has to be proficient.
If you look at USC from a personnel perspective in the middle of that defense as well, I just got this pulled up here on PFF again. Mileage may vary. That's the caveat I offer every time we mention these grades. But of the 4 guys who played more than 190 snaps this year, the primary defenders in the middle of that defense, none of them have above 60 run grades. A couple of them have, Keyshawn Silver, which is a big transfer from Kentucky, his rush grade is like 33.3, which suggests he's just not doing a good job there. Sorry, I misread that. 51.4, still not great. I just think that's an advantage Oregon has in this game. And if they don't, I really feel strongly that if it doesn't feel like an advantage and they don't lean into it, it's going to be a big mistake. Now, the other part is that USC's pass defense, without its 2 starting safeties, will be susceptible. And based upon how Will has operated, like, establish that run game that hit some play actions. Like, we saw that a ton against Minnesota with a lot of success in terms of like that wasn't end up being a touchdown to Kenyon Sadiq, but the full extension grab, that was just a really nicely designed play action play that, Oregon was able to capitalize on, get the safeties up and just throw it over the top. That feels like where you could really create separation here, is if you can have that success on the ground, which I think is absolutely a priority. And then you can hit some of those shots over the top, even without some of your primary outside receivers in this game. I will be fascinated to see like what is the counter if USC loads up and actually does have some success here against Oregon's run game. Like, how does Oregon respond in that regard? I'm not saying that will be the case, but USC is aware of what the perceptions are, and they're aware of Oregon's strength running the football. And so I'll be interested to see like what does D'Anton Lynn have in terms of counters to this, and if he does find something, what's Oregon's counter to that? Because when you are down some of these primary outside receivers, it does get a little wary. I think Oregon has clearly found something with its tight ends and playing on those bigger personnel packages and just in hitting those guys over the, whether it's in the screen. game or over the middle. I was texting a buddy of mine yesterday that it feels like Jamari Johnson is in the Kenyon Sadiq of 2024 role, where he's just like the screen tight end now, which is fine with me. But I'm curious to see if maybe they'll have him run some more routes down the field, because he certainly feels like a difference maker if USC is able to take away some things on the ground.
Yeah, you mentioned that that Michigan game for USC earlier, and that got me thinking about something I saw earlier when I was looking at stuff for them, and that was that they blitzed the crap out of Bryce Underwood in that game. It was over a 60% blitz rate from their defense, because with a true freshman quarterback, they knew that they just weren't going to be really scared of him, and just were going to send blitzes after him, try to confuse him as much as they could. And then because of that, then you could load up and be able to stop the run. So I think overall, I was looking at their blitz rates throughout the season. They are generally a more than average aggressive like blitz team. And we've seen at times, the Indiana game, Wisconsin, even early in that one, Oregon's offensive line struggled to be able to handle those blitzes. So I think that could be something to look out for sure. If USC can get Oregon into some of these 3rd and long scenarios where Dante Moore has to drop back and they can send extra guys after him, especially when you got, an offensive line that did play really well last game. But Alex Harkey at times, that ankle, he was getting beat around the outside, is as good as he is as a physical guy. If you send slot corners coming off that right side, and you got to communicate between Harkey and Pregnon, who weren't on the same side together, I think that could be something that USC would want to do to this Oregon team, because we've seen it work for other teams the best defenses that Oregon has faced this year have been able to do that successfully.
Yeah, I was just going to say, USC's defense, they're going to have to take some gambles here. They're going to have to take some risks. And I would go back to, especially the Indiana game, watch what Indiana did to confuse Dante Moore, because it really felt like that was the only time this season where the offense just could never really operate because of what the opponent was doing, not weather related. Really felt like Oregon was up in the air. Defensively here now, Oregon, let's shift focus. Oregon's defense versus USC's offense. Dan Lanning has sung his praises all week. Mekhi Lemon is going to be a NFL draft pick at some point whenever he declares, more often than not, after this season. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a first rounder, second rounder. Jacoby Lane is another guy. This is a guy that Oregon had a legitimate chance to go.
He was a commit.
Yeah, and get and bring here. He flipped to USC. This is another name that's going to be on NFL draft boards, and he's kind of one of the classic USC guys where maybe he goes as a junior and he gets picked in the 4th round. And sometimes we also see this type of USC receiver return for his senior year and explode and turn into a 1st or a 2nd round pick because of the usage in the offense that they've got. So Oregon's facing a receiving core that's got 2 legitimate NFL dudes. Their run game has improved significantly. I think this is probably the most balanced offense Lane Kiffin has had in his time.
Lincoln Riley.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why I was saying Lincoln.
You're stuck in 2015.
Yeah, wrong USC coach.
Lincoln Riley has had with his time at USC in the last 4 years. Jaden Mavia is – he basically forced Miller Moss to transfer last season because he was simply better. Once Miller Moss got hurt and Jaden Mavia went into the lineup, this offense is going to be as potent as an offense as Oregon has faced all season, and it's a pretty loaded group.
One of the things that was interesting, if we're just looking at it from what this test is, this is the number 10 pass offense in the country. Oregon's faced 2 other pass offenses all year that are in the top 100, and that was Rutgers, checked the boxes, dominated that game, and that was Indiana. That's the one time they've given up more than 200 yards. So I say that because Oregon has the number 1 statistical pass defense in the country, basically in all metrics: pass yards per game, pass yards per attempt, opposing QBR. Like, on paper, this is the best pass defense. It also is not a defense that has faced an offense this good. And so I think if your expectation is USC does not have any pass success in this game and Jade Mayava lays an egg and it's ugly, I think you're probably going to be in for a disappointment. The area I'm most fascinated by in this particular matchup, Oregon's secondary versus USC's pass offense, is what is the fix for Mekhi Lemon, who plays 2/3 of his snaps in the slot? I think that makes it difficult to foresee Brandon Finney lined up on him like the whole game. Like I don't think that's going to be realistic. Could put a lot of pressure on Jaden Kennedy. Wondering if we see other personnel play in the slot, how they go about doing that. I asked Dan a question kind of about that, and he said that you can kind of tip off your coverages and your defensive scheme a little bit depending upon how you approach that. So it's kind of a fine line. But Lemon is a guy who's just tortured slot corners and nickels and linebackers all year. And it's going to be interesting to see how Oregon faces him, because I know the fans will just say, oh, you just throw Brandon Finney, the All-American corner, on him. I'm going to guess he's on Jacoby Lane a heck of a lot more than he's on Mekhi Lemon. And the Jacoby Lane matchup will be also fascinating because, Matt was talking about his draft grade. This is a guy who going into the season, I think had a first-round draft grade by a lot of people. People talked about him as maybe being wide receiver 1 or 2 off the board. Production hasn't been quite there this year, but this is still a super dynamic guy on the outside. And while we've been really impressed with what Oregon secondary has been able to do to outside receivers, with the exception of Elijah Surratt, this could be just kind of a different animal. So Finney is going to be tested. I just don't think it's by the same receiver a lot of people are expecting it to be by.
I will say the fact that the Finney was not just stuck on Surratt in that Indiana game, and Surratt was able to get a lot of matchups against Ifeoma Badegwu and Johnson, and they weren't just traveling Surratt with him, is notable and something to watch for if they do that with Finney on a guy like Jacoby Lane. But yeah, like you're saying, they're not going to put him in the slot. So I think this game a lot of it comes down to what can the middle of Oregon's defense do. Whether that is, do they put a guy like Dylan Thieneman in the box? How much do they do that? It's going to be a huge test for Kennedy, obviously, but then also an opportunity for guys like Jerry Mixon to make a play and jump a route over the middle, because you look at Maiyava's interceptions this year, and a lot of them are just ones where it's linebackers over the middle being able to jump things with a little bit of confusion. It's not him pushing the ball downfield and being too aggressive. He's been generally pretty safe when he does that this year, but it's an opportunity if you get Bryce Betcher can tip one up, or just have guys in the right place at the right time. Because when you have, the best receivers in the slot, this guy's going to get 10, 15 targets in this game, most likely. And a lot of them are going to come in that, between the hashes in the middle of the field. So it's a big game for Oregon's the linebackers, the safeties, Kennedy, obviously. And then with the run game, USC has, like you're saying, they've run the ball efficiently this year, and they've done it. We talk about Oregon and the tight ends and being able to pass out of the tight end sets, but USC has really good receivers. And so they're sitting in a lot of 11 personnel and they spread things out. But then because it's all spread out, then you can run the ball because, teams linebackers are trying to worry about Mekhi Lemon in the slot and you're spreading these teams out. So you got to have, you got to have Bear Alexander winning those gaps in the middle and Amari Washington, being solid there. Like Bryce Betcher was talking about, the discipline you have to have. We've seen it at times from this linebacker group. If they jump out of position when you're all spread out like that, that can be a costly mistake and it can lead to an explosive play on the ground, which USC has been able to get this year. So I'm very fascinated by this matchup overall between the USC offense and Oregon's defense. It's by far, I think, besides Indiana's the best test we're going to see for this or for Oregon. Washington next weekend will be interesting. They have, guys who can run around and stuff, but this is a college football playoff offense, I think. So that's going to test Oregon like this.
How effective Oregon's pass rush can be will be a pretty big storyline, because a lot of teams have taken the approach of quick passing, get the ball out quick, don't allow a Mateo, a Tatum, to a Yodi to come off the edge, a Blake Purchase to come off the edge. Minnesota tried it at times last week, and even though the sack numbers were low, Erik and I still believe Mateo should have had a sack credited towards him. When Lindsey,
it's a travesty.
Yes, when Lindsey clearly just surrendered Cobra and balled himself up in the pocket before he could get sacked, because Mateo came off. USC will take their chances. They will hold on to the ball a little bit longer than most teams. And can Oregon take advantage of that? And to John's point, can you get tipped passes? Can you create opportunities to turn the football over? Because if you turn USC over, that's the recipe of gaining some separation. That's the recipe of forcing USC's hand into becoming a more one-dimensional type offense. And we should note that the USC offensive line has had like 8 different combinations that they've not really – they've done a good job, but they've not had a stable unit throughout the entire year. Now you go on the road, it's going to be hostile, it's going to be loud. Can you maybe manufacture a couple false starts? Can you manufacture a couple holding calls because of an offensive lineman kind of panicking and making a mistake? And then the Jaden Mavia scramble. It's not like Dante Moore. Like, he'll run if he needs to, if it's the last resort, but he uses his legs more so to extend passing plays and throw the ball deep. So I think Brandon Finney talked about it this week of it's staying attached to your guy downfield and don't letting up the big play, because that could be how USC creates it, of Jaden Mavia just running around the pocket hoping a guy opens up.
Yeah, the one thing also to note is the left tackle Elijah Page left the Iowa game. I'm not sure if he'll play. He's, again, mileage may vary, PFF. He's their highest graded PFF offensive lineman, and certainly their best in pass protection. So what's the fix for them if that's not the case? And if he doesn't play, and it's not you can't imagine they've got another left tackle on their bench they're going to bring out who's better or as good. What is Oregon able to achieve there? And I hate that we just keep bringing it up, but I mean, it feels like Mateo needs to be productive in this game. Like, I mean, I know it's so obvious, and fans probably are tired of hearing us talk about it, but if he can wreak havoc, which we know he's capable of doing, that could really flip this game for Oregon. And same thing with Tuioti, same thing with the interior guys, same thing with Blake Purchase and whatever personnel is out there up front. The ability to cause problems here. Because the other thing with USC, while they throw the ball quite a bit, they've only allowed 12 sacks in 10 games. So they've done a good job at protecting Maiava this year. And some of that is kind of what we saw with Bo Nix when he was at Oregon. Remember, like, Oregon probably gave up 12 sacks in 2 seasons when Bo Nix was the quarterback. And some of it was really good pass protection. The other part was a quarterback who was really good with his feet in terms of climbing the pocket, escaping, and either throwing the ball downfield or getting upfield for a run. Maiava's another quarterback who, again, he doesn't run it at a high clip. I think he has like almost negative yards rushing this season. But he's able to extend plays, and that, John said the word earlier, plastering. That was the word of the week for the Oregon secondary, it sounded like.
Yeah, you got to make sure you're sticking with these guys through the end of the play, because Maiava is going to be a guy who can't run around with it for 4 seconds and then throw one up to Lemon and let him go make a play. They do have a good screen game when a guy like Lemon is as good as he is after the catch. They do get it out quickly with their RPOs and stuff like that underneath to get those short looks. But yeah, a big opportunity for Oregon's defensive line. When you look at Oregon's defense, it's kind of the one thing that hasn't almost been there is that production from the D line. Like, you look at like the sack rate and just a lot of the sacks even Oregon will get is stuff like Finney in the last game on a corner blitz. They haven't, the defensive line in general hasn't been as productive as last year. When you look at Mateo had 10 sacks last year, Jordan Birch had 8.5, and he was playing half of that season hurt. So if Oregon can, like you were saying, take advantage of maybe some injuries on the offensive line, with USC and get after Maiava and put him under pressure, that'd be huge, because anything you can do to disrupt him and Lemon's rhythm is gonna be what you do, or gonna be what you need to do. Because if you can take away, they're gonna want to attack the seams, especially with Lemon, because that allows him to. He has the ability to. He's a rare guy who can be vertical threat from the slot with that. He's a super good contested catch guy, something that Finney mentioned as well, for a guy who's like 6 feet tall. So yeah, they just have a lot of things they can do on offense. If you can get after the quarterback, it can take away so much for them.
I've seen a lot of national discussion kind of talk about Oregon versus Indiana and kind of the success that Oregon had, or Indiana had, against Oregon's defense in that game. And I want to kind of go back to that. And what if I told you guys USC had 350 yards of total offense? They threw the ball for 230 and they ran for 115. Would we say that was a successful day for Oregon's defense in terms of the offense that they're playing? Or would we say, oh man, USC went up and down the field all over Oregon's defense?
Those are good numbers. I guess I want to know how many points they scored too. But yeah, if you told me those were the yardage splits, I would say
27 points.
27?
Yeah.
I think Oregon's offense can score more than 27 points on this USC defense. I think it's in a win if that's the case.
I mean, Indiana, that game in which Oregon lost, I'm not trying to take away, they were the better team by far, but it wasn't like they outclassed Oregon. They had 326 yards of total offense. They averaged 4.7 yards per carry. They threw for 215 and ran for 110. Like, Oregon was right there. They had their issues, no doubt about it. They gave some short fields, but I think if you say you replicate the same kind of performance against Indiana, and from a defensive perspective, and you hold this Trojan offense to under 350, you feel like your defense did its job to give your offense an opportunity to score. Now, your offense has to go and score. That's what they could not do against Indiana defensively.
Yeah, no, and that you're right. I mean, that was the story in that game, is the inability for the offense to take advantage.
And defensively, like just situationally, not being able to get off the field on third downs as Mendoza was able to hit Surratt on those. You got to be able to stop Mailava from finding Lemon underneath on third downs to pick up and convert. Because, you look at Indiana's game log, and the Oregon game is one of Mendoza's worst games of the season. He was good in that game, led a very great drive in the fourth quarter, but threw a bad pick six to Brandon Finney that if someone like Jamie Kennedy can make a play and undercut something while Mailava's trying to be aggressive downfield, that can be a game changer right there.
All right, let's take a quick break. We come back, we'll dive into our game props and game prediction scores here. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik, why don't you pull up the props here and let's run these out.
Yeah, let's dive on into these ones. I forget how we did last week. I'm sure it was fantastic. I'm sure we nailed them all. So we'll just operate with that assumption here. We're not tracking these quite as well as we.
I think we did honestly do pretty good because we thought the game went like we thought it would. So unlike some of these other ones.
I was 7 points on the Oregon total from nailing, and I had 35-13. All right, this one from K Stokes 04, over under 2.5 pass breakups for Finney. I'm going to take the under on this. That's a pretty large total. And again, I am expecting 10 to 12 targets are to Mekhi Lemon, and Finney's maybe in coverage on one or two of those in this game. So I was actually also looking at, I don't think he's been targeted more than 4 times in a game all season anyway. So 2.5 would mean he's just making plays on everything that's thrown his way. And I don't anticipate. So I'll take under.
Yeah, I'll go the same. He was even saying the other day when I asked about like how do you make an impact when the best receiver is a slot guy? Like it's got to be not just making the tackles afterwards, but him shutting down Jacoby Lane and the other guys on the outside to not get targeted. So I think 2.5 is a big number anyway. So I'll go with the under there. Lemon's going to be that guy getting the targets in the slot. Kennedy would be who I'd be looking at here.
I'm going to take the over.
Ooh.
I think he's going to get tested, and maybe not necessarily always with Lemon, but I'm going to take the over 2.5, 3. Give me 3 breakups.
Because they might throw it to Jacoby quite a bit, and I'm sure. Yeah. I think he's going to be in coverage there a lot. All right, from at Mopar Ducks, over under 6.5 catches for Sadiq. The over feels like it should hit, and if they're going to do what they need to offensively, it kind of needs to hit. So I'm going to lean that direction while also acknowledging this would be the second time in his career he's gotten there. Another time was last week. But I would think, having rewatched that game several times myself, and I'm sure the staff way more times than I did, his involvement was critical to the offense having the success it did, especially on some of those drives that were sustained, like the 2-minute drill and then the one in the third quarter. So got to get this guy the football.
Yeah, and we are yet to know what is to make of the injuries at receiver yet for this weekend, but we saw it last weekend, how big of an impact he made. Like you're saying, he became that true number one guy that I thought when Everett Stewart went down, I thought he could be for this team. I think that, that week of recovery was really big for him. He just looked a lot more juiced out there. He was explosive, breaking tackles, doing headstands almost into the end zone. So I think 6.5 is a big number, but if Oregon is going to be able to move the ball, I think it starts with Kenyon Sadiq in the pass game again this week.
I thought it was interesting that last week in the build-up, there was some rumblings from, I think, the Todd McShay show that Sadiq's usage was a topic of discourse internally at the Oregon Athletic Department. and come out, and Sadiq has the career day that he had. I'm going to take the over. I don't like it, though. I mean, he's only hit – he's had 6 or more twice, and then the next closest in his career from a reception standpoint is 4, and he's done it multiple times. This season and last year, I think he did it once. It's just a lot of targets. If Gary Bryant Jr. or Evan Stewart or DeCorian Moore come back, that will shrink his usage rate a little bit as well. But I'm going to take it, but I don't like taking it.
I just thought he was so involved in that last game. Like he had 8 targets in that, like through 2.5 quarters. They like barely were even using him down the stretch either.
All right, third one from @JaredStam342. I like this one. Dan Lanning will go for it on 4th down 5 times. That is a big number. Matt and I were talking about it before the show. The only time they've even gotten to 5 in the past was Penn State, where they went for it 7 times. If they're going to get to this number, this game is going to have to be a classic where there's just all sorts of aggression needed. And I think we'll learn, again, pretty early on whether or not Dan thinks this is a gambling Dan dice roll game, or if this is a game where they're a little bit more content to play defense and just play a little bit more traditional football. Because remember Penn State, it was like every 4th down they faced in that first half, it was like go, 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 go. I'm going to take the under, though, because it feels like 5 is a large number.
Yeah, like you were saying, in the Penn State game from the get-go, like 4th down, 3rd down, everything, you knew they were going for it. I think he will show his cards early, but 5 just seems like such a big number. So I think you would have, like you said, it'd have to be such a back and forth competitive, like maybe even into overtime to get to 5. That right. I think it just seems like a lot.
I don't think this happens. I don't think there's even a chance it happens.
Shooting it down. Sorry, Jared, not happening. Says Matt. All right. I like this one from Dr. Quacks. Oregon outscores USC in the first half. USC outscores Oregon in the second. I say I like it not because I think it's going to happen, but I think it's like a creative way to create some sort of a game script. I think Oregon's going to outscore USC in both halves, so I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the scenario is if Oregon gets up big and then USC is throwing the ball all over the place, trying to come back in the second half and ends up scoring more. But I think Oregon is going to try to control this thing with the run game and put up, a reasonable score in both halves.
Well, the real case would be that USC wins the game. I think if it plays out this way too, right? That's the other angle.
If this was flipped, USC maybe outscores Oregon in the first half and Oregon comes back to win, I would take that. But I'm going to go Oregon wins both, either ties in the first half and wins the second, or wins out both.
All right. And then we got the last one here from @KDAL17. Dante Moore over 260 yards passing. Maybe I'm surprising people because I've been taking kind of the under on these props recently, but I'm going to take the over here. I had in my Skopil that he sets a new career high. I think Oregon's going to have a lot of yards in this game. I think I had over 500 in my column there. So I think a couple hundred on the ground. I think maybe 300 in the air. This is a USC pass defense that without a couple of starting safeties. And again, we'll see if the availability report, which will come out right around 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, by the way, put that one in your calendars. If you're a diehard and you want to just know who's available, 10:30 a.m. Myself and a bunch of other Oregon media will be tweeting out the availability report. This one's going to be fascinating to see because if USC's down some guys and Oregon's down some guys, like what is that? There's no clarity necessarily on who exactly is in and out. There's just rumblings. But based upon kind of what we've heard, Oregon might be down a couple receivers. USC might be down both at safeties. And if that's how it plays out, I like Dante to have a big day, even though I think the ground game is going to be the engine as it always has been.
Yeah, part of me is split on this because I feel like they're going to rely on the ground and not on Dante as much. But at the same time, I feel like they found the passing game was so good in that last one that they are going to be aggressive early. I think, like you said, hunt some of those shots. Will Stein likes to dial up he says he likes to dial up like 2 shot plays a quarter. They're going to be doing that. And if Dante can hit one of those, all of a sudden a yardage shuttle will boost way up. And I think you could get to that 260 mark.
This is where John's comments about Kenyon Sadiq, if he's going to have a big game, if USC's safeties are out, that's a huge advantage for Oregon. And I think that's where Dante Moore's success through the air could come to hit that 260. I am going to take it. Jamari Johnson, sneaky though. He quietly has had a really good, like, 3 or
4 catches in each of the last 2
game
games.
run
Yeah.
for the Ducks. So I would sit here and I would argue, like, maybe together they combine for over like 120, 130 yards. That's not going to surprise me in the slightest.
I was going to say, it almost feels like it's not one of our props, but if there was an over under 100 receiving yards for Oregon's tight ends, I think I'd slam it at this point.
Yeah, or a double digit targets or receptions. I think I would get there too. Yeah,
they're involved.
Jamari Johnson's last 4 games, 1 catch for 56 against Rutgers, 1 for 23 against Wisconsin, 4 for 36 against Iowa, and 4 for 57 against Minnesota. 10 of his 17 catches have come in the last 4 games.
And Kenyon Sadiq had, his pop moments where he would take a jet sweep or do whatever last year, but it was the Big Ten championship game and down the stretch of that season that he, really took off and kind of elevated to people thinking when he was coming in this year as the number 1 tight end, yeah, this guy can be special. We saw some of those flashes. So
I'm taking the over.
You're taking the over.
Yeah. All right. Game predictions. John, why don't you go first, Eric, and then I'll go last.
All right, I got this one 31-20 for the Ducks. I think USC's offense is good enough that they are going to be, in scoring position, and I think that I was trying to figure out a score for USC, and I was realizing I don't think they're going to get to too many touchdowns, but I think they're going to be, kicking field goals at least, because this offense will try to move the ball, and it will, I think like you were saying with the yardage total for Mayaba, I think it will be probably the highest Oregon has let up. Passing, just because they are going to be throwing it as much as they are. But I think ultimately Oregon is going to be able to control this thing with the run game. Their defense is outmatches USC a little bit. USC's defense, like they'll be able to control USC's offense more than what USC will be able to do. So I think Oregon will be able to comfortably win this one, but USC will certainly, especially in the first half early, I think USC could early in this game, you get the right game script, go right down for a Makai Lemon touchdown, and it feels like he's cooking. Oregon could feel like they're on the back foot, but I think they just have too many options, offensively between the run, between the pass. Just you can just kind of go through this USC team a little bit.
That's kind of how I see it. I think that's what separates it for me is it feels like USC's got one punch. Oregon has a multitude of ways to hit them, and I do think the run game, as just a baseline that Oregon has, is a razor of the floor that USC maybe kind of lacks. And I don't want to say USC. We didn't even really touch on this podcast, but King Miller as a walk-on redshirt freshman being their leading rusher after they lost their 2 top running backs early on in the season. Super impressive just response from that kid and that rush offense to be as productive and as consistent as they have been. But what they have is not what Oregon has with this 3-headed monster. And I fully expect all 3 will be integrated and highly involved in an offensive attack that I think, again, gets over 500 yards in this game. I think it's dynamic. I think you could get over 200, both passing and rushing. I've got Oregon 38-24, a game that is close at half. Oregon separates in the third quarter, and maybe USC tacks on a late touchdown to make it look a little bit more impressive. But I like Oregon here to make a statement. I think they need to. I think the College Football Playoff Committee is kind of looking for reasons to dock them a little bit. I don't think they give them one on Saturday.
I go back to Oregon's run game and the offensive line just kind of pummeling the USC defense. I think this is going to be a game in which limited possessions, Oregon's going to shrink the clock. They're definitely going to try and play the middle 8. This feels like one where maybe Oregon wants to defer, get a 3-and-out, score, and then try and hope that the timing works out where you get the ball with 4 or 5 minutes to go at half. Try and milk it all the way down, score a touchdown, get the ball to start the second half, and go on another signature 5-6 minute drive that we've seen them do sometimes to really shrink the game. I think Oregon's going to have moments where USC's offense is simply just going to be really tough to stop. And
Agreed.
There's going to be plays that they're going to be in position and they're just going to make a play. I think this game will be close at half. I think this game will be close going into the fourth quarter, but some kind of pivotal moment where Oregon's defense gets a stop and they go down and score a touchdown and they get another quick stop and they do the same thing. I have Oregon 35, USC 24. It's going to be a really close game. It's going to be a contested game. But I think when we walk away from it, we're going to know clearly, Oregon was the better team. Oregon was the playoff caliber team, the team that's in the contention for the Big Ten championship game with some help. We're going to see that. We're going to see the signature win. And this is going to, I think, kind of catapult Oregon just a little bit, maybe into that 5-6 range for the college football playoffs in a couple weeks.
That's where you want to be. There's no doubt about it. 5 looks awfully good right now.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for submitting your prop bets. Thank you for listening to the show. We will be back Saturday night with a post-game edition breaking down everything that happened at Autzen Stadium between the Ducks and the Trojans. Until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
See ya.